46, 5A1. Is there, one additional thing. All persons being discussed today or affected were given advance notice of the executive meeting in writing and advised that they may require such discussion be held at an open meeting. No request has been made. Is there a motion to convene into executive session?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All that say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Calling the meeting to order. We'll start off with doing the Pledge of Allegiance. There were no votes taken during executive session. Next item, please. Oh, sorry. Is there a motion to seal the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All that say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Next item, please.
Next is discussion items.
First, we have the East Providence School Department's 2023 to 2024 virtual learning plan. And I'll open up to the superintendent to fill us in on this.
Yes, you should all have a copy of the virtual learning plan. It is pretty much identical to the plan that we used last year, which we only implemented one day last year. The plan looks pretty much similar to what we did when we were out on the COVID year as to how we would operate. So there has to be a minimum of 3 hours of live instruction, and we would use Google Meet to do those with students checking in to their first period or homeroom class, depending on the level. So the plan is pretty thorough. It explains the entire thing. We communicated it last year to parents and families. Principals will communicate it beforehand, just in case we do call a virtual learning day for weather. But it addresses all the areas as required by RIDE, and it needs to be submitted before we can call a virtual learning day, which hopefully we won't have any inclement weather this year, and we won't need it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee?
Dr. Ferrand, could you just please, I know earlier this school year, there was a situation or scenario that districts were, can you just clarify, the district is unable to call for a virtual learning day without schools being officially canceled? Or there was a day earlier this year it was too hot, and there was, can you kind of maybe just elaborate a little bit on that and talk about the difference of when we're able to have a virtual learning day count for a school day opposed to not?
Yeah, so some districts, I know one district did call a virtual learning day that day. We did not choose to go in that direction, but you can call the day, and then you need to submit that to RIDE so that they're aware that you did call the day. It can be for any type of weather emergency or situation like that.
It will count.
It will count. A virtual learning day will count for a day of instruction.
Any additional questions or comments from the committee? With that, we'll move on to the next item for discussion. We have the student attendance policy.
So Diana Clarkin and Stacy Messier are here tonight. They were two of the people on the committee, pretty much chairing the committee that came up with the policy. We did make 2 slight changes after having the principals review again to the policy. I sent it to you, I think, last week. and they were highlighted in red. So Section 8, under attendance policy procedures, it did say students who are tardy in grades 6 to 12 must either be accompanied by a parent guardian to the school office or have a written note by their parent guardian to sign in for the day. We removed that. And we also removed at the end of paragraph 9, with the exception of siblings, students may not leave with other students on the emergency contact list. Those are not practices that we do, so we removed and made changes to those 2 items. And then the rest of the policy you saw on the first read. So they can speak to process about how it was written.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Diana Clarkin, and we're here to discuss with you the attendance policy. As far as the committee, it was comprised of myself, Stacy, the other deans, as well as assistant principals from the high school and middle schools. We met probably 4 or 5 times with robust conversation regarding the attendance policy and what we should put in and what we shouldn't put in. The attendance policy stands on its own as far as what you would be approving, and the attendance policy procedures and glossary are for the schools, for them to be able to use and carry out the procedures of how to maintain an attendance policy. We are under obligation through RIDE to monitor attendance through the nudge. So we have we do have different definitions of what an excused and unexcused policy, absence is, as well as the decision rules on what they should be, guide them in making the decisions of how to go about a student who is having chronic or even attendance issues. So if there are any questions, I'd be, Stacy and I would be able, hopefully be able to answer for you.
Questions or comments from the committee?
I'm just going to ask a quick question. I've already spoken with the team over there. What happens ultimately if you have a student who is chronically absent? So I think I feel I need to know this for my own self and maybe anybody who's watching. So you have a child who hasn't come to school in a month and a half, no notes, where, truancy happens, then what happens after that? What happens to the student?
So truancy doesn't happen just like that.
Yeah.
There are multiple calls that happen at the school level that will either contact the parent or try to figure out what might be excluding the student from coming to school. At that point, we talk about doctor's notes. We talk about evaluations that might be needed, because we do have students that will say, I'm not going to school. And their parents will not put their hands on a student, nor should they, to drag them to school. So therefore, if it's something that we feel could support the student, we try to put it in place at the school level. If the school is not having any luck with either the parent not having luck with the student, then we might look at a truancy issue. But usually, truancy court is not what that child needs at this point in time. If they're out for a month, there's a reason why they're out for a month. And we usually find out that there has either been some trauma or there's been some kind of diagnosis that has never been brought up before. So that in itself will constitute a meeting and a discussion with the parent, with the child, with the school staff. And when I say school staff, it could be the principal, the assistant principal. It could be the dean. It could be the guidance counselors, social workers, and it's part of that MTSS. I said it right? Committee that meets to discuss what the child needs at that time. And it could be that either You know, I'm not a special educator, but sometimes that will also come up in conversation with the family as well, depending on what the doctors or what the evaluators have said.
After all said and done, does that student who still does not come to school, is that student considered a student in East Providence?
Of course, he or
Yeah.
she is, yeah.
Just absent every day?
He or she cannot be absent every day and still be a student of the district, if in fact nothing has happened. So we would, I mean, it's not like they get dropped from the rolls, but we need to have some kind of guidance as to what is going on with that child. If in fact we cannot get in touch with the mother, if we cannot get in touch with the student, if in fact we've gone to the house and have done our due diligence and they're not living there anymore, then yes, they are dropped. But because parents don't always let us know if they're moving. Sometimes it's out of state, sometimes it's just across the line. So they don't think it's important. We might hear from another school department that they've moved. So that does end up happening sometimes as well.
Thank you.
Are there any strategies in place currently or being talked about for the exampled students that Ms. Boucher brought up, folks, or even that you brought up, folks who may have had some trauma or have, health issues we may not be aware of? Are there any strategies we use in place for, the example student who may have been absent for 4 weeks in a row and is just not unable to or unwilling to come to one of our school buildings? An example of just like, is there a virtual learning strategy for students of that sort?
They have to go through the superintendent for that virtual learning option. If it's a situation where there may have been trauma, you have DCYF that gets involved, you have the state that gets involved, we have ESSA calls constantly that special ed is part of. So there are not policies, but procedures in place that will allow us to move forward and move the child off the dial. Sometimes it can't be a regular school setting. Maybe it needs to be something else. Maybe it needs to be homeschooling issue. So we try. It's not like they missed 4 days of school and boom, they're in truancy. It's a process, and it is a process. Mrs. Messier will speak to, or could speak to, the issue of last year. We had a meeting with probably, on average, eight parents each week, each month, to talk about truancy, talk about attendance, talk about what supports we can put in place for the student or the parent. And sometimes it is the parent that needs the strategies. if you will.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
So what are the particular roles that a school identified support team would play in following determining that a student is chronically absent?
So basically, the administration at the school will look at attendance on a daily basis. Mrs. Messier did it in her past position, and we determine whether or not she in turn will determine with conversations with that parent, phone calls with that parent, discussions with the student, what the child may need at that time. In addition, we also have our meetings where we will go out and talk to the parent and find out what needs to be done from a district level and how we can support them. If in fact neither of those two things work, then we do get the courts involved. And if it's an older child, middle school or high school, then it's a truancy issue, where it goes to the in-district court here that we have on Mondays. If it's a parent of elementary school students, then it may be a civil case where they have to go to Providence, but it's not a civil case that they get brought into court. It's a civil case that they talk to an intake coordinator, who's usually a social worker, and they will determine how we can best discuss how to get the child back in school. If the If the intake coordinator doesn't have any luck with them, where the phone calls are not being returned, or the parent could be combative, then it does go to a truancy court situation, and that's in Providence, not here in the district. I have to say, Magistrate Cardona has been very good the last few years. I believe he does have a good pulse, a good finger on the pulse, because he came from a culture of not being in school. Both he and his brother had a tough life, and he'll tell the kids this all the time. So he can talk to the kids and sort of get through. Not in all cases. Sometimes he has to refer them to Providence, but I mean, he has done a pretty good job.
When it comes to, again, this goes towards more of procedures, but just out of, interest, how will this be applied when it comes to students being tardy on the bus? Does the bus company inform you, and then you inform the secretary? Is that
I'm sorry, I'm not, are you talking about,
if students are late because of a bus issue from that morning?
Yep.
Like how does that get determined? Like, is it self-reporting from a student, or like who gets informed of that information?
so if I understand right, if you're saying that the bus is late getting to school, is a child considered tardy? And they are not.
Yeah. So that part I do understand,
Okay.
but how does that get determined? Like, how does that get confirmed on the school department's end that it is in fact because of the bus, for example? Is
Well,
it someone?
it already, I mean, sometimes I do get a phone call, and I have from maybe a new secretary or whatever, but deans and principals should know at this point in time that they are not to mark a student absent or tardy if the bus is late. I have even told parents that if you have no way of getting getting a student to school and they've missed a bus, call me. I'll see if I have a bus available that can come and pick them up. Because I want the child in school. I'd rather have them in school late than not have them in school at all. But, there have been issues where we've had buses that are late, and we've never had a situation where they were marked tardy.
Okay.
It's not their fault, it's beyond their fault.
So that makes sense. I just was trying to, I guess, put together like what the process would be with like your department, and then informing the necessary parties within each school separately. But you did answer my
Yeah,
question.
and if in fact we know, sometimes it gets really busy at the bus depot, they don't call us all the time. I mean, if it's really an emergency, they will. But if a bus is running late, they don't always call us. So, but if they do, they might have broken down. So we'll call the school and we'll let them know. We usually contact you to let you know that there's another bus on the way, or whatever the situation may be. We will then in turn call the school and say, hey, by the way, bus 0 is going to be late today. But
Sometimes the whole bus just shows up late, so they all just report to the office at once, and they basically say, my bus was late, and then, like, the office just takes all the names, and they don't get marked tardy. So it's just, because the whole bus walks in the front door at the same time, so that's never usually an issue
no,
for us.
no.
Even if it's like just a couple minutes and we don't get a call, could be a construction delay or something.
And we have a lot of those.
Yeah.
And then regarding, I guess, the reinforcement part of it, right? The unexcused absence, and then not being able to attend, like it's listed here, a dance, a play, sports. How hard or challenging will that be to apply that, like, fairly across the board to people? From
Across
what
the
I've-
board, meaning grade-wise?
Yes, well, it's, if it's a star player of a team, like, is there gonna be some sort of like leeway for that, or is this gonna be kind of just a blanket, if you're, regardless of who you are, what team you're playing for, what game it is that going to be applied fairly across the board to everyone, or is there gonna?
I would hope that is an equitable situation where everybody's treated fairly. I have heard that there has not been that. And shame on whoever's making the decision to let the player play. If they're, because they are not in the, they're in contradiction to what the policy says. So unfortunately, I have a problem with that, and I believe if we're trying to implement this and do it with veracity and with fidelity, I think that even Dr. Ferrand would have a problem with the individual. If it be an adult, would have a problem with it.
And it's like you said, it's been an issue before, and I know that this administration is definitely trying to do everything it can to, make sure that attendance is improved. But I did want to, make sure that everyone was aware of that will be unacceptable from the top.
Yep, it is. And I think if anybody were to know that, they should, I don't want to put anybody on the spot and say be a narc, but be a narc, because it's not fair.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, go ahead, Max. Diane, I just have a question back to the buses. Do they notify the district every time a bus is late? So like, how do we, it's a $7 million contract, which is up, they'll be looking for a new one, but how do we evaluate a company that is transporting our students that we pay $7 million to?
If it's a significant delay, they will always call me. And I know that while I was out, I'm sure Sandy got her fill of transportation calls. So Ocean State has done a good job for us. They have been solid. They are communicative when it needs to be. But to say they're going to be 5 minutes late, there are more things going on in that depot office than calling us and telling them that they're going to be 5 minutes late. Sometimes the dispatcher will call the principal and say the children are going to be late. But I have to say that, especially at the beginning of the year, people will take their time. If I have students that are on the bus and they need a door-to-door stop, sometimes they take their time. I can't allow that. I have to make sure that everybody, and whether this sounds militant or rigid, I apologize, but every student has 3 minutes to get on a bus. If they aren't there within 3 minutes, the bus can leave. If the bus stop is taking too much time because kids are fooling around or whatever, I need to nip that in the bud. So if in fact they're getting to school late, it could be because that parent wasn't ready with that child, or it was inclement weather, or it was the fact that there's construction. Now East Providence is known, the whole state is known that there's construction everywhere. So I think people have been a little bit less hopefully relaxed with regards to whether or not they're 3 or 5 minutes late. If they're 15, 20 minutes late, I've already put that out there to the principals. If you have a bus that's coming late, notify me. I need to work on it to make sure that that child is in school by 8:30, 8:40 in order for them to be prepared for school. I can't allow that to continue to happen.
Back to the 3 minutes. Can you just elaborate on the 3 minutes? What does that mean? A bus pulls up to a stop or a student's
Yep.
house. It waits 3 minutes.
They can wait up to 3 minutes. That's what they're allowed to do right now. So a student, especially if it's a special ed student, may not be able to stand outside. They have 3 minutes to come out of the house. If they're at a bus stop, they are allowed 3 minutes, which it usually doesn't even take 3 minutes for all the kids to board. That's what we've used as a guideline. Before it was 5 minutes, now it's 3 minutes.
All right, because down South County, when I happen to get stuck behind a bus on Route 10 or 138, if the student's not there, that bus just keeps rolling.
And that usually happens.
That's, in other words,
They won't, you think 3 minutes is a long time, it really isn't. And I have told the bus drivers with certain students who will do it consistently for whatever reason, I've told them, if they're not outside waiting, you need to roll. You don't stop, you just keep on rolling, because we have had that issue where they've
Yes.
just taken advantage of it.
Okay.
I mean, a pre-K student, a student in elementary school, a student with a wheelchair, 3 minutes, that, you know, I'm not
No.
talking about a student that's able-bodied and should be out there waiting for a bus.
Right, I'm sure, and everything, Dan, like you said, using your discretion, but I would just like to see, because at the end of the day, we hired a business to provide a service, and like we said, the beginning of the year, if it's becoming late, Chris and I know, you know, the state construction should be ending on the 15th, the asphalt plant's closed. Because, it's everywhere you go, you see, you know, bus companies are looking to hire people, everybody's short drivers. At a certain point, I want to just be able to decipher, is that why our students are getting late? Because,
There are a couple of buses right now that I'm having an issue with, and when I say an issue, it's just not going as smoothly as it could. It's because there are sub-drivers. Everybody's short bus drivers.
yes, yeah.
If I could do a fleet of vans, that would be great, because everybody can drive a van. The problem is you need a license, and you need to be clean from drugs or alcohol to get a CDL. So I'm all for anybody wanting to be a bus driver. I'm all for it.
As long as they're not from the old school, in other words.
No.
That'd be a little different,
I'm all for
you
everybody
know?
being a bus driver. If they want to come in and apply, they can go right to Ocean State. I'm sure they would be very appreciative, but they have to pass. They have
Yes,
to
yeah.
pass the tests, and they have to pass the driving tests, so it's not as easy everybody thinks it is.
Yeah,
to
no,
be a bus
I think
driver.
a lot of the public knows it's tough. I mean, I believe it's a tough job loading that bus up, driving with the kids in today's world, but just to get drivers like anywhere across the board, there's just, nobody seems
Oh,
to.
it's still a national issue.
Yeah, that's what I'm, throughout the whole country, people just, it's sad to say, don't want to work no more. I mean, it's hard to believe that you can't get a part-time job, some retired person driving a school bus because of numerous reasons, but as long as you're comfortable with the service that they're, you know, providing so far, I have confidence in your ability of staying on top of them, so thank you.
Oh, no, they were like, oh, great, she's back.
She's back. Thank you.
You're welcome. Max, did you have another question?
Yeah, so how many tardies and early dismissals is a student allowed to have? Because I know in here it says, for example, that tardy days will follow the same guidelines as excused and unexcused absences, which
Yeah,
seems
so-
kind of confusing.
So, you know, tardy is sort of the same issue with them. Tardies and early dismissals would cause a child or student to miss instruction. So we want to make sure that they're getting as much instruction as possible. So whether that be 1 or 2 days, or if we see a pattern, you know, we'll contact. And it's not so much me all the time. We're trying to put the onus back on the principals and the deans, and that's why Mrs. Messier is here beside me, because we worked really hard last year, and she did an amazing job at Hennessy, going from number 9 to number 1. And it can be done, and all of our schools can accomplish that. It's just that you need the fastidiousness of the administrative staff. So, you're welcome.
So 2 questions. Number 1, I'm going to ask how you did that, because I think that's kind of why I'm here. I'm here to listen to how we can convince students to come to school, and how our principals and other schools and deans and support staff can help make that happen. On the second thing, I just wanted to clarify, this is in its own a policy. This has nothing to do with the policy or the procedures the schools have when it comes to playing sports, participating in field trips, going in the chorus, the band, as an after-school activity or dance or anything like that when it comes to that, correct?
Well, let's answer
Okay.
the first question, and I'll have.
I didn't want to put her on the spot. I thought maybe if you want to come back, or you don't have to do it, but that's kind of where I'm at. I kind of want to know, if it has been done and can be done, what can we do to do it? And this, I understand this is the policy, but this isn't always gonna work. And I think everyone in the audience knows how I feel. So what do you do? How do you make it happen?
Well, I think before she starts, and she won't say this because that's who she is, but you have to have a good relationship with the families. And Mrs. Messier you did put that?
See?
Oh, okay.
That was my number.
All right, then I'm gonna let you go.
I was just gonna say, yeah, so thank you for wanting to know that information. And I will start by saying that, you know, in terms of attendance, we have attendance teams across the district in every school that's doing a lot of really great work, because I've already seen it this year. People doing some different things, but I think it definitely starts with having a strong relationship with the families. They have to know that you're coming from a place of, it's not a disciplined place, it's a place of support and where you want to help them. So any conversation that I've ever had with a parent in terms of attendance always comes with a start of, I want to support you, I want to help you, I want your child to be in school, I care about you. And I think if you have that relationship right there, you have a really great start when it comes to improving attendance. The other part of attendance, I think going from 9th to 1st, is consistency. So consistency is key. Attendance was not something that we discussed once in a while. It was a daily conversation. And that can look different across different schools for sure. So for example, some people might do, shout outs on their announcements. You might have a conversation at your assembly. You might have a conversation about something involving attendance at your lunchtime announcements. It was a consistent conversation that was always super important. So I think that was a big takeaway for me from last year. And then, like I said, just the other biggest part was just really being able to work with the family in a non-judgmental way. So, our attendance teams that Diana and I, when we talked about pre-truancy, was we always would bring people in. The nurse was always a part of that conversation. Sometimes the principal, the teacher was always a part of that conversation to bring in the academics. So it was a whole team approach for sure. So I think that's how kind of we went from 9th to 1st. But like I said, there's a lot of great attendance work going on throughout the district right now, for sure. I don't know if that was helpful, was it? Okay, great.
And it is consistency, and it is a place from a standpoint. I mean, when I get there, parents can be combative, they can be upset, they could be, why am I here? But when they leave, which is the ultimate issue, they're very grateful. And they say it because they know that we're genuine and we're looking at a place that we want your child here, we want them in school, and we want them to learn. It would be easier for us to say, oh, they're not in school, no problem, move on to little Susie Q, who's in school every day. And it's not that. So, we put the majority of effort into that 5% or that 2% that might not be there because they need the extra support. And there could be something going on that we were not aware of, the school was not aware of. And not that you want to be in everybody's business, but the more that the parents are communicating with us, the more we can help those students. So. Second question.
I was looking at Dr. Fran's head nod. I just wanted to know, social probation is not included in here. It's not a definition. It's not. So that's a separate school by school? Because
Yeah, the high social probation is listed in the handbook.
right.
The definition of social probation is in the handbook. It's not a policy, school committee policy.
So
That's
it's,
what I was just looking up
Yeah, so
too,
the
to see if
handbook-
that was listed.
so right now, if you attend school, if you were not in school on the day of an event, you cannot come to an event. But the policy is, social probation is not a policy. That's just a handbook per school or per, because I just want to make sure we're on the same, before we put a policy in place that actually has definitions and decision rules. I think that we need to look at that, if that's gonna be part of it, or it's just gonna be per school, how we're gonna follow through with that. Because if consistency is the key, I think we need to be consistent among our schools and decide how attendance plays a part.
Well, not only attendance, but it does go into code of conduct and all of those other things. So we are working with the principals and the deans and the assistant principals to become more consistent. I think the high school they were the only ones who did social probation. I think that the middle schools are starting to look at it. I don't know how far they got, being that I haven't been here, but that was something that we had talked about at the end of the school year, that they would look at that and become more consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions or comments from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next is public comments.
I have Miss Tori Jessup Crowley.
Good evening. Just on regards to what we were just speaking about, the social probation, as a parent, and I agree with Ms. Bouchane that there needs to be a universal guidance, and that should be for the policy through your committee. That way we have universal between middle school and high school. So whatever applies to the high school should definitely apply to the middle school, in my personal opinion, because we don't want that discrepancy between the different schools and having one school say one thing and another school say another. So I feel that that universal should come from you guys, because guidance has to come down. You guide the city. So we need to make sure that that is done, please. Second, I just wanted to thank you all for your support with the Dyslexia Awareness Month here in Rhode Island. And during the month of October, I just wanted to give you a quick update. I did send out press releases today, and I did send one to the superintendent as well, and trying to invoke some sort of unity within our district. I do see that this week we have the Orange Unity Day on Wednesday for bullying. I'm a little confused about Friday, where we have the pink out and a blackout. So I'm not sure which one we are actually doing on Friday, but if we can find a way to do maybe possibly a red out or some sort of something, I would appreciate. I don't know if that you want that to be a district-wide or to be school by school. But I do want to announce that we have 2 events happening this week. I'm very thankful that Mayor DeSilva will be lighting up our city hall on Thursday evening, 5 p.m. with a citation declaring October being Dyslexia Awareness Month. And then also on Friday, we have the kickoff to Light Rhode Island Red at the State House at 5:30 with our own East Providence Senator Robert Brito and with Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos. So I appreciate anyone to come. Everybody is invited. The public is welcome. And I thank you for your support.
Next item, please.
Next is action items.
I'll entertain a vote to approve the 2023 to 2026 Teachers Collective Bargaining Agreement. Is there a motion?
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
I second.
All that say aye?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Next, we have, I'll entertain a motion to approve the East Providence School Department's 2023 to 2024 Virtual Learning Plan. Is there a motion?
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All that say aye?
Aye.
Next item, please.
Next is announcements.
Is it possible that we could do a red light out front? I wanted to ask last time, but at the last meeting, but are we able to light up the front red? Can we just look into it if we can, because I feel we deserve to, if we can do it. I don't know I don't know how it could be done, but if City Hall can do it, I don't know why we couldn't. If it's possible, again. Yeah, if the high school, that's my announcement. Light the school red. I don't know how else to make that announcement, but.
We'll take a look.
Yeah,
I
if
don't
it's
know if
possible, if we could do something, we do, she's right, we do whatever we can for whatever else. I would like to try to do this. I think it's fair.
I also agree, and if you could just send us an email letting the committee know an update on that as well.
Yeah, I wanted to just also kind of just reiterate, the importance of folks to come out to the event in East Providence on Thursday, or at the State House on Friday, and also kind of just give an additional plug for any other information. The folks can go to www.ddri.org. Or can visit the Hamilton Institute. Thank you to Alfred for putting this flyer up for the public to see. Yeah.
Any additional announcements from the committee? Next item, please.
Next is adjournment.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All that say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Have a good night.